The Indianapolis Colts are one of 31 teams likely to call about Myles Garrett from the Cleveland Browns. But does this type of trade make any sense for either party? Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Hicks, your resident film nerd of horseshoehuddle.com. My partner Jake Arthur is not here today, but don't worry, I have a fun off-season show planned for y'all. We are a little over a month away from the start of the official new league year for the Colts and for the rest of the NFL. And, you know, when the new league year starts, we're going to have so many new rumors. We're going to have trade updates. We're going to have free agency rumors and releases and stuff. And those things kind of got kicked off earlier this week as Myles Garrett penned a letter to the Cleveland Browns and Cleveland Browns fan base officially requesting a trade. And then wide receiver Cooper Kupp also informed the Los Angeles Rams fan base that the Rams are going to seek a trade for him this offseason. So with the trade rumors going crazy this week, why not make a whole episode talking just about trade rumors, these two guys in particular, talking about other options the Colts could explore this offseason. Now, do I see the Colts making any trades this offseason? Probably not. I don't think it's the most realistic thing in the whole wide world for a team like this, but it's the offseason. It's time to talk about these type of things. So let's kick off today's show talking about Myles Garrett and Cooper Kupp. Now, Myles Garrett, a first ballot Hall of Famer, two-time Defensive Player of the Year, I believe, one of the best overall football players in the league. I mean, if you had to put, every player in football into a fantasy draft and restart the league right now, he might be the highest non-quarterback taken in that draft because he is that good of a football player. He's only 29 years old, so again, the end is kind of coming for him, but it still could be like a good 5, 6, 7 years away. Like, there's still plenty of good years left in his game. And yeah, this is just a superstar talent at pass rusher. He's got 2 years left on his contract, a $40 million cap hit. The Cleveland Browns would eat $57 million in dead cap, which, we can't call them the dead cap kings right now because the Saints will forever have that, but they're getting close. They're getting pretty close. Now, how realistic is this for the Cleveland Browns to actually move a player of Garrett's caliber? And how realistic is it for the Colts to pursue Myles Garrett? I think to answer that second question, the Colts are going to be one of 31 teams that make that call. All 31 teams are going to call about them. If the Browns could call, they would call about him as well. Because, again, we're talking about a 1A player. This is the best pass rusher in the league. This is the best defender in the league. Probably the best non-quarterback in football. Every single team is going to call about Myles Garrett. So obviously the bidding war is going to be pretty insane if the Cleveland Browns are actually entertaining trade offers. I know Diana Rossini said something the other day on X saying like, oh, don't expect it to be 2 firsts. I'd be shocked if it's not 2 firsts. I know he's 29 and I know it's a big cap hit, but again, we are talking about the best defender in football here. If it's not 2 firsts, it's at least going to be a first, a second, and probably a rookie contract type player. So when you're looking at it from the Colts perspective, the Colts had the 14th overall pick in this draft. If they go the 2 first route, it would be the 14th overall pick in this draft and a pick next year. Or if you go the other route, which is like a young player plus this year's first plus some change, you're maybe looking at the 14th overall pick plus a Nick Cross or a Leatu Latu and then some picks on top of it. So whatever you want to go with there. Now, does this make sense for the Colts? In a sense, it kind of does, just because you have to operate, if you're Chris Ballard, like your back is against the wall. This is that big splashy move to get everyone to buy into what you're doing, and it does make your team better. Now, I would argue it doesn't put you over the edge. Like, this doesn't turn the Colts into a Super Bowl contender, but it makes your team better, it makes your defense better, it makes your overall roster better. So I could see it from the Chris Ballard perspective. Now, the other aspect of this, though, is should you be making moves like this when you have questions at quarterback? Probably not, because you're going to be far away from reaching the Super Bowl if you don't have a quarterback regardless. So getting a 29-year-old player, giving up young, potential young players in first round picks for a 29-year-old when you're not really in a window to compete because you don't know what you have at quarterback is probably not the smartest allocation of resources. So again, in a sense, it does make sense for the Colts. Like, yes, this is a superstar player. He makes your team better. And for the 2 years that you have him at least, which you could lock him up for the rest of his career, you're going to be a better defense than what you would be without him. But again, when you're a Colts team that doesn't really have the quarterback, I'm not saying you don't make any trades and you don't try to make your team better, but giving up multiple firsts or giving up a first and a big chunk of change for a player that probably doesn't push you over the edge is a bit much. So in that sense, I probably would say the Colts do not win this bidding war. If there ends up being a bidding war, I'm still not convinced that Myles Garrett actually does get traded just because there's really no precedent for a player of his caliber getting moved. And again, players can't really hold out anymore. So the Browns could just dare him to hold out. And eventually he's going to report. Eventually he's going to play out these final 2 years of his contract. So we'll see what actually happens with that. But yeah, I don't think it's super realistic that the Colts are going to be an option here, especially when one thing that he cited is he wants to win. I mean, we've been in the weakest division the past decade and have no division titles. We're not really, the standard of winning right now in the NFL. So, yeah, it would be awesome. I would love to have Myles Garrett here, but yeah, I don't think it's super realistic for the Colts team. I do think they should call. I mean, again, if you have a working phone, you should be calling about Myles Garrett, but I don't think it's super realistic for the Colts. And then to talk about the other big name that apparently he didn't request a trade. It looks like the Rams told him they're going to pursue a trade for him, and that's Cooper Kupp from the Los Angeles Rams. He will be 32 years old this next season, 2 years left at a $57 million cap hit. That is absolutely insane. The Rams would eat $29 million in dead cap. Now, this price tag is pretty nice. Like this price tag, you're probably giving up, conditional picks, like mid-round picks at best for a Cooper Kupp. And this is a guy who, yeah, I mean, a couple years ago, he was the best receiver in football, but injuries happen, age happens. We're not the same player that we were back in 2021. Yeah, I love Cooper Kupp. I think Cooper Kupp's one of the best receivers in football when healthy, but Father Time is undefeated, and we've kind of seen that a little bit with Kupp. I think he's still a very good player. Like, I think he's a really solid player, but is he worth the $57 million that a team would have to pay? Probably not. No, he's not going to be worth that. And that's probably why you're seeing a team like the Rams even entertain a trade for one of their best players in their franchise's history. Like just a fantastic wide receiver, offensive player of the years ago, record holder. I mean, fantastic wide receiver. But injuries happen, man. And that's why this is even a discussion for him right now. You're not going to find perfect players on the trade market. There's always going to be some kind of caveat. You either have to pay their big contract, and that's why the team's trying to deal them, or there is a reason why they're trying to move off. So, yeah, when it comes to Cooper Kupp, I don't think he makes too much sense for the Colts. The Colts have their top 3 wide receivers locked in. Now, are any of the top 3 as good as prime Cooper Kupp? Absolutely not. But they're younger. They're guys that you've had around. I think, maybe you could do a trade like this if you're like sitting down and you're looking at it and going, yeah, Alec Pierce had a good season, but that's not going to be sustainable. We could sell high on Pierce and get a reliable player, not even a reliable player in Kupp. Like, again, I can't even sell myself on that. I don't know. It doesn't make a ton of sense for me. You guys let me know in the comment section what you think with the Cooper Kupp. But I think a Cooper Kupp makes a ton of sense for a team like a New England who just doesn't even have a rosterable player at wide receiver right now, and they have like $100 million in cap space. They can certainly take him on and make that work. Where the Colts, they're going to be hovering around 35 to and upwards of $55 million in cap space, but they kind of had their wide receivers locked in. You don't really need to make that move for a Cooper Kupp. But those were the 2 big names that came out the other day. I'm sure in the next couple of weeks we'll see, even more names request trades or more kind of whispered when it comes to trades. I mean, heck, I keep seeing Green Bay Packers players tweeting about how upset they are about certain stuff. So maybe some Packers players become available to trade market. We will see there. But coming up, we're going to continue the speculation. And these are not players that have requested trades, but these are other kind of big fish that it could make sense for the Colts to at least call about. Again, I'm not going to solidify and say the Colts will make these trades because you never know, but we will go through some names where, there's some big names out there that might be on the trade market, and we'll see if the Colts could maybe dive into those a little bit this offseason as well. But first, are you looking for tickets to the next big event, maybe last-minute tickets to the big game next week? Whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app does all the hard work for you, curates the best deals, so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Gametime Picks for a while now, and here's why I love it. You get curated deals that make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price, and no more sifting through those thousands of options. I recently also grabbed a super deal for a prime seat, and I couldn't believe that value. It was truly a steal, guys. It was awesome, and the seat view feature is an absolute game changer. Before I even hit buy, I can see exactly where my seat will look like in the venue. It's so reassuring that I'm not going to be stuck behind a stanchion or in some nosebleed seats. I know exactly what I'm actually paying for when it comes to my ticket purchase. And also the best part, you're covered with Gametime's lowest price guaranteed, and if you find a better deal elsewhere, they'll refund you 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up, because we're all adults and something certainly will come up when you're trying to make plans. So ready to make your next event even better? Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Alrighty, Locked On Colts everydayers, we are back talking about trade options, potential trade rumors. Again, we're not going to spend the entire offseason talking about trades and all that because a lot of these aren't super realistic, but we do need to at least devote the one show to it. So this might be the one show you guys get this offseason about all the trade stuff, but we went through the two guys who officially have talked about trade rumors or talked about being on the trade block in Cooper Kupp and Myles Garrett. These other guys we're going to go through aren't officially on the trade block, but there could be some sense in their team dealing them. There could be some reasoning behind it, or it wouldn't hurt the Colts to even make a call, So I think the first name we have to throw in there is defensive end Trey Hendrickson from the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, he's a 32-year-old pass rusher who just led the NFL in sacks. No team in their right mind would trade Trey Hendrickson, but we are talking about the Cincinnati Bengals, and when it's coming down to money involved. I mean, it's a simple fact of the matter that we all know this about the Cincinnati Bengals. They don't have the biggest checkbook. Big reason we've been talking about recently here with Louis Anarumo, why that defense kind of went downhill in recent seasons, because they let so many defenders walk inexplicably in free agency. So a player like Trey Hendrickson has 1 year left on his contract. There have been a lot of rumors and whispers lately with Duke Tobin, the Bengals general manager, not giving the most excited comments about Hendrickson's contract stuff. Hendrickson saying that he wants more money. Again, I'm not saying that this trade is certainly happening, but when you are a team like the Colts where you just nabbed their defensive coordinator, you're looking for guys who fit his scheme, and you're also looking for high-end productive players, Trey Hendrickson is perfect. So if there's even a remote chance that the Bengals consider dealing a player of Trey Hendrickson's caliber, you got to make the call if you're the Colts. And I think this is more realistic than a Myles Garrett, where Hendrickson should still get a pretty hefty price tag if he were to get moved. You're talking probably a conditional second that maybe gets up to a first, maybe a second and some change, because he's a little bit older than Garrett and it's an expiring contract, so you probably don't get those multiple first or one first, but you're still talking about a pretty good deal here for a player like Hendrickson. I think you're still more willing to do that, though, because you have the system in play and all those things there. So, yeah, I could totally see a Trey Hendrickson call at least. Again, I can't commit to an actual trade. Chris Ballard has made trades in the past. It's mostly been at quarterback. And then he made the one for DeForest Buckner years ago as well. I guess he made the Yannick Ngakoue one too. So he does kind of get involved in trades, but it's hard to commit to a trade, obviously, at this point in the offseason. We're over a month away from the start of the new season. But I digress. We're talking about Cincinnati Bengals defenders. Trey Hendrickson could make sense. And heck, I would kind of just call about any Cincinnati defender right now. Again, the Bengals are a team that are notorious for not paying players. And they have paid a couple of those defenders like Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt. But when they're coming off a season where their defense was one of the worst in football, maybe they're more open to dealing one of those two linebackers in Jermaine Pratt or Logan Wilson. And we could see the Colts maybe jump in on that, where it's like, hey, the Bengals want just a hard reset on that defense. Maybe you can get one of these linebackers to play alongside Zaire Franklin in this new scheme and kind of help everyone get to where they need to be. I would personally prefer a Logan Wilson if that were the option, but again, I think it doesn't hurt to actually call the Bengals and just see if they're willing to part with any of those guys, especially if Lou Anarumo is down for it as well. You can maybe make that transition a lot easier for your defense. And then one other player that, again, I haven't heard any kind of rumblings about this player, but it would of a player that has 1 year left on his contract, who's had some good moments. He's going to be due for big money coming up soon. And again, we don't know if the Bengals are actually going to pay it. And that is outside corner Cam Taylor-Britt. I don't know if the Bengals would even be willing to move him. He was a very volatile corner last year, had some really, really high-end moments, along with some really bad moments on film. But I do think he's an outside corner that fits the height, weight, speed dynamic that the Colts look for, who has a history of Lou Anarumo. So again, if the Bengals are even somewhat willing to part with him, you make that call and you see what you can do there. I think Cam Taylor-Britt could be a good option. He's so volatile at corner, so it's hard to really say, if he's a high-end player or not. But he's a young player who's super athletic. He brings a new dynamic than what the Colts would have at corner. But again, that volatility is kind of funny to look at right now, especially considering the Colts corners where they're kind of consistently decent. Cam Taylor-Britt, it's very high highs and very low lows. One other big name guy I want to mention here, and then in our final segment, we'll go to more like smaller name guys or maybe some more outside the box type thinking here. But one more big name guy is cornerback Jaire Alexander from the Green Bay Packers. Now, Alexander has been in trade rumors, I feel like his entire NFL career at this point. There's been a lot of locker room stuff with him in the Green Bay Packers, from him missing games to speaking out against the Packers in the locker room. And I'm not saying that this is stuff that gets me excited by any means about the potential of trading for Jaire Alexander, but he's such a good player when he's healthy and he's on the field. Even though he hasn't really matched his highs from his rookie season or from his early parts of his career, he is still a fantastic cornerback when healthy and would be a massive upgrade for the Colts. So again, it's another one of those where if the Packers are willing to part with him whatsoever, maybe they want to do a culture reset in Green Bay. Because again, I mean, Josh Jacobs said something about needing a wide receiver one the other day, and I saw 5 different Packers receivers all complaining about it. There's something going on with that team there. So maybe they want to do a culture reset. They can send out Jaire Alexander and the Colts can get their cornerback one. I think that could be a really interesting option for the Colts there if we're talking big names. But that's all I have for the big names here on today's episode. But to really close out this just crazy trade episode with speculation and talking about guys that I would at least make a call about, let's talk about some more underrated options, maybe some lower end options, maybe some more realistic, in a sense, options that the Colts could call about this offseason. But first, the big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it more exciting than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, PrizePicks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks has a free pick for the big game where Pat Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard to win. If you pair that with one more correct pick, you're cashing out pretty big. Check out the promos tab to tail any of the super sweet Millie winners with the big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 off, $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, Locked On Colts Everydayers, we're back with this Wednesday show talking all about trade speculation, completely inspired by the Myles Garrett and the Cooper Kupp drama that happened earlier this week. So we talked about those two names at the top of the show, how they don't make a ton of sense for the Colts. Well, obviously Garrett makes more sense, but Cooper Kupp doesn't make a ton of sense. Then we looked at some Bengals players and also Jair Alexander and how those bigger name guys could make more sense for the Colts to call about this offseason. Now let's talk about some more under the radar type guys, some guys that, it could fit the team a bit and they wouldn't really cost the Colts an arm and a leg to bring them to Indy. Jake actually listed a couple of these guys here that I'm going to go off of. But the first one I really want to talk about, and actually one of our comments mentioned it here too. Let me see if I can. Here we go. Rich Wheeler mentioned it in our comments, talking about Kyle Pitts at tight end. I think this one is really interesting to me because Pitts kind of fits a lot of that Eric Ebron mold that we saw Chris Ballard go for early in his tenure, and it really worked out for the Colts. Well, it really worked out for 1 year for the Colts. They turned Eric Ebron, this former top 10 tight end pick that a lot of people considered a bust. They turned him into a Pro Bowler for one season, and obviously it went downhill after that, but you still got the one successful season, which in my book was a big win for the Colts. Kyle Pitts is kind of in the same boat where he hasn't lived up to those astronomically high expectations with the Falcons, and the Falcons might be ready just to move on and start over there. I could see the Colts being a team just buying low on that. Like, I'm not saying it's going to be bought super low because there is still the save face aspect of it for the Falcons. Like, you're not going to get him for like a 7th round pick. That's not what I'm saying here. Like, he's still a fine player. But getting a player of his athleticism and his talent in kind of that buy low situation and bring him to a team where, like, again, we had no production at tight end last season, no receiving production whatsoever at tight end. So just, if you bring in a guy like Kyle Pitts, it can be like, look, this was your last shot. This is a lot of our last shot as well. Like, come in here, do your thing, and just give us some receiving juice at tight end. I think that can make a lot of sense for both sides if the Falcons are willing to actually move on from Kyle Pitts. It feels like he needs a restart. The Colts are the perfect destination because there's no competition here. We have no tight ends on this roster. So come on in and be our tight end of the future. I think that would be a really interesting player to call about there. Another player to call about, this is the Green Bay Packers yet again. I swear I'm not trying to target them here. But linebacker Quay Walker, who's kind of fallen out of favor a little bit with Green Bay. Like, he still got his snaps last season, don't get me wrong. But we did see, Edge Cooper get some more snaps than him last year. I think McDuffie was the other linebacker. I want to say McDuffie's his name, who was also out snapping him at times last year. And Quay Walker, a former first-round pick, appears to kind of be moving down that depth chart. This could be another like buy low on a super athletic linebacker, long arms, fits the Chris Ballard mold, and you could get him in this Lou Anarumo system and just say, look, we're going to sim blitz you a lot. We're going to make it so you don't have to think as much on the field, and you just attack. And I think he could be a pretty good fit for what the Colts want to do this next season. And he wouldn't cost the Colts a ton. Again, the other names we're talking about, even the linebackers from the Bengals, like, those are good players. They're going to take a lot of money and a lot of, picks to get them here. Quay Walker, it's kind of getting him on the downturn of his career. Hopefully you can revive his career a little bit. I think Quay Walker is an interesting one to look at. I don't think he's a perfect fit by any means, but I think he's an interesting name where you could throw a pick at and say, like, let's see what we can do with this. We got an interdivisional one here that Jake mentioned, and I think this one's really interesting because it kind of does make sense for both sides, except the whole part that this is a division rival, and that's tight end Evan Ingram from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, we all infamously remember that the Colts were the team that was competing with the Jaguars to sign Evan Ingram a couple years ago, and Chris Ballard just came up a little bit short. And also, I believe Ingram mentioned something about the quarterback situation being much better in Jacksonville, and that's why he chose the Jaguars, which, I mean, look, Trevor Lawrence isn't great, but it makes sense. I totally get it. But Ingram is coming off a year where he was really banged up for most of the season, really didn't produce the way that he typically does in his career. And also the Jaguars have a pretty solid young tight end behind him in Brenton Strange. So maybe they look to move on from the veteran this offseason just to get off that contract, open up some more space to build out a roster that was pretty atrocious last year. And again, the Colts just need someone who can play tight end and do something at that position. So maybe the Colts could offer, a late round pick for Evan Ingram. Again, it's a little bit tough because this is an interdivisional trade here, but I do think a trade like that could make sense for the Colts. And certainly, I mean, it couldn't hurt the Jaguars. You get a pick for a guy who barely played last season, and you get that cap space to really help build out your roster around your quarterback and for your new coach. So again, interdivision stuff is tough, but I would certainly call, if I were the Colts and try to get, Ingram at a decent little trade here. And then you could still draft a guy in round 1 or round 2 and just have an actual good tight end room for the first time in years. So Evan Ingram, I'm very intrigued by that one. I think Jake was hitting the nail on the head with that one there. And then one more veteran guy here who I don't think would cost too much because he isn't really at the peak of his career anymore, but Kevin Byard from the Chicago Bears. He has been traded around quite a bit in his NFL career now. He was a star for the Tennessee Titans early in his career. I think he went to the Eagles after that, and now he's with the Bears. This would be a true just get a veteran in the room to help your other safeties. I don't even know if he would be your starter if you traded for him, but I do like the idea of getting in a playable third safety, fourth safety who can be kind of a mentor type guy to a Nick Cross and maybe to a free safety that you draft, or maybe to an outside free agent, free safety that you sign. I don't hate that move whatsoever. So if you can get him, again, this would be like a 2027 6th or 7th round pick. Like I can't imagine you'd be trading too much for Kevin Byard at this point, but if you can just get him in the room and he can certainly help out the other players on the roster, then it can be a win. But yeah, I think that's another kind of realistic one, but we'll see. We'll see what the Colts do if they entertain any trades this offseason. Again, Chris Ballard is not super aggressive in free agency, but he's made trades for Yannick Ngakoue in the past. He's made trade for DeForest Buckner. He's traded for a lot of quarterbacks. So I don't know, maybe they buy low on Derek Carr. I mean, gosh, heaven forbid. Well, then we'll have David Carr picking us to win the Super Bowl at least. So that'll be a fun offseason. But yeah, we'll see what Chris Ballard does if he actually entertains any trades this offseason, if he commits to this actual, more aggressive mindset that he kind of put his back against the wall, so to speak, in his press conference, saying that he's going to be more aggressive. We'll see if he actually ends up being more aggressive. But that's all we have for today, guys, talking about all the trade rumors. Again, it was really just inspired by those top 2 guys. We'll see if any of these other names kind of surface as potential trade candidates throughout the offseason. But regardless, it should be a fun time of speculation and other reports saying the Colts should trade for these guys. That's the beauty of the offseason, is just the speculation of it all. So we have a little over a month away from the start of the next league year, the new offseason, and that's when all these like rumors and discussions will truly come to fruition. But I do want to thank you guys for making Locked On Colts your first listen today. Next, go find Locked On NFL. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks2, all on Twitter. We're also on TikTok and Instagram. I believe we're on TikTok still. I have to talk to Jake about that because who knows if we had deleted it by accident on that like 12-hour window where you couldn't delete it. But also subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. We love you guys, raise views, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon.